Tom Brady is not happy. And Tom Brady is not a guy to complain. He is not a guy to say, get off my lawn, although maybe he's becoming one. He doesn't like the rule change, Peter, the one that you predicted correctly would pass easily. And I didn't see a whole lot of pushback to the expanded jersey numbers from a strategic standpoint until after the rule was passed. Here's Tom Brady, social media. It's dumb. It's going to make for a lot of bad football. I guess it confuses quarterbacks when they see a guy in the 20s. Is he a defensive back? Is he a linebacker? Who's blitzing? Who's the mic? 7 is the mic. That's going to be weird when they're yelling it out at the line of scrimmage. Peter, I can't imagine, when you consider how much film you study in advance of the game, Tom Brady's ever going to be confused about who it is on the other side of the line of scrimmage, whatever jersey number they're wearing.
You know, before this happened, I had one guy who works for a team, shall we say to me that this is going to be a debacle. I said, why? And he said, this is going to be a debacle because everyone in the NFL is used to studying certain plays or certain players at certain positions. And now what's going to happen is you're going to see all these numbers and you're going to see, let's say, you know, a linebacker who's, you know, number 7, let's say, or whatever it is. And I think what you're going to do is you're going to assume that guy, or let's say a linebacker who's number 22, you're going to assume, oh yeah, strong safety. And he's just playing down in the box. And I think that is why a lot of traditional, you know, players and, you know, scouts, coaches, and everything don't like this rule. But, Mike, there's a very simple reason why this rule happened. And there's a simpler reason why no one in management or ownership or really, you know, had any complaints about it whatsoever. Last year, the Kansas City Chiefs had 3 players on their team who wore the number 30. And 2 of them were on the team at the same time. One of them got injured in training camp and was out for the year. But then during the season, 2 guys were wearing the number 30, and they would get to Sunday and they would have to decide, you know, one of them was a running back and one of them was a defensive back. And at that time, Brett Veach just said internally, he said, we've got to do something about this. We just don't have enough numbers, you know, and so we need to spread out who can have these numbers. And Mike, the biggest culprit is the fact that practice squads are going to be somewhere between 14 and 16 this year after being 16 last year. That is why, you know, that combined with the fact that some teams have 11 or 12 retired numbers, that's really the reason why this had to happen.
And the fact that Brett Veach and other administrative types saw that problem, and for example, in Kansas City, Andy Reid, the head coach of the Chiefs, didn't grab Brett Veach by the collar and say, well, listen, you know, he starts every answer, well, listen, Veach, this is going to screw things up for us. That's not a very good Andy Reid impersonation, but there you get with the point. But the point is this, where were the head coaches, right? When there's a rule change that is rocketing through, and guys like Peter King are reporting in Football Morning in America, it's going to pass easily. They're on notice. Where were they before Wednesday, shouting from the rooftops, this is going to be a debacle? Unless it's Andy Reid, John Harbaugh, Bill Belichick, Bruce Arians, any of the big-name coaches in the NFL saying, whoa, you guys want some bad football, you go ahead and pass that rule. Those voices were silent before the rule was voted on and passed easily. And the fact that Brady didn't say a word about it until after it passed, Peter, look, I understand he's probably above the falderall of NFL news and information, but if it's going to affect you, I'd like to think greatest player in league history is paying some attention. Why didn't he say something before Wednesday, Peter?
Well, that's a good question. Maybe he doesn't read Football in America as quite as attentively as he should, Mike. But, hey, look, I don't think you ask why did Andy Reid not make a big deal of this? I'm just telling you this right now, Mike. Brett Veach might be upset about something, and maybe a few other people, the equipment manager of the Chiefs, might be upset about something. But I can just tell you this. If Andy Reid didn't like this rule, the Kansas City Chiefs would not have proposed it. So I can tell you that Andy Reid is not upset about this rule. He just is going to shrug his shoulders. And look, Mike, I think sometimes there is a little issue of the day, let's say, which this one is going to be. Some quarterbacks clearly are not going to like it because it's going to make film study a little bit harder. But I also think that if you really ask yourself this question, and again, I'm not in the film room, so I'm not with those guys as they say, oh, this is terrible, this is going to make this harder, that harder. I guess that I am like what one of the club executives told me over the weekend when we talked about it. Basically his whole attitude was, hey, listen, we got to loosen up a little bit. It's just not that big a deal. And I kind of agree with him. Hey, Mike, you know what is really going to be fun, though? Here's what I hear. Robert Woods and Jalen Ramsey of the Rams each want to wear number 2. Now, Ramsey, in college was number 8 at Florida State. Woods, though, was number 2 in college. And so I think he's going to call dibs on number 2 because he's more of a veteran player, and he's also got seniority on the Rams. So unless Jalen Ramsey parts with some of his contractual gains, I think you'll probably see Woods with number 2, and who knows what you'll see Jalen Ramsey with.
We had Robert Woods live last Thursday on the program. We talked about that very issue, this land rush that will ensue in locker rooms throughout the NFL for not just the single digits, but the other numbers that have been expanded for use by linebackers. Linebackers can go in the teens and the 20s and the 30s now. You can have running backs in the 80s. Ty Montgomery had been in the 80s because he started as a receiver. There's a lot more flexibility than just expanded single digits, so you're going to have some jostling like that. Let me tell you this, Peter. Here's where players need to be aware, and there was a report last night from the St. Paul Pioneer Press that Dalvin Cook thinking about moving from 33 to 4, but he's looking into how much it will cost him by virtue of all of the unsold Dalvin Cook jerseys. Now, I've been working on this, and I actually do some work for a change. Every once in a while, I try to do some original reporting. It's not very often. It gives me a headache, so I don't try to do it very much. But I'm aware of a player who has expressed an interest in changing his number to a single digit, and he's been informed by his team that to do so will cost him $170,000. Because he has to buy the Fanatics inventory, Peter, not at cost. He's got to buy it at retail. Can you believe that? I mean, there's something inherently unfair about it. But that's the kind of fight that we're going to see. And you're going to have some guys, and the more popular players who are more likely to have a stockpile of jerseys with their numbers already on them, those are the guys who are going to be at a more difficult spot when they're trying to squat on a single-digit number or some other number, because the price for them is more likely going to be higher than it would be for somebody that nobody buys their jersey as it is, so there's no inventory that's out there that would have to be purchased.
You got to figure, I was just going to say that, let's say you're Dalvin Cook and you want to make that, for whatever reason, vanity, preference, whatever the reason would be. And let's just say that you're a fairly popular player. Like I would assume that Dalvin Cook's jersey in Minneapolis is going to be one of the most popular jerseys of any athlete in the Twin Cities. And so you've got to factor that in, Mike. And the one other thing that I believe you're going to see happen is you are going to see a lot of the lesser lights who are not going to have a bigger cost. You're going to see them be more anxious to change jersey numbers, because if they don't have much to buy back, well, what's the big deal? They'll just change jersey numbers. Who knows? Maybe it won't. Some players, it probably won't cost them anything.
And Peter, the conversation that came up in the context of the J.J. Watt signing with Arizona and the unretirement of 99, that's going to be an issue potentially, eventually. And I've still got on my list of things to write about all the single-digit numbers that are retired. Will there be a little push and pull? Will there be jersey is retired until it isn't with some of these other teams as guys start to hover around jerseys that previously weren't available to them?
I think the other part of this is, Mike, I mean, because the NFL has become a 24/7, 365 league, this is just one of those other things. I never even thought of this when I first wrote about it a couple of weeks ago. It just didn't occur to me that people were really going to think it's a big deal. But I would say of everything I've written about this offseason, I would say the biggest reaction I got on Twitter is when I wrote about these numbers. And different websites would pick it up. Like, I think Bleacher Report or somebody picked it up. And I had to not look at Twitter for like 24 hours. It was just a vast expanse of opining about numbers. And different fans wanted their guy to wear a certain number and all that stuff. And I just never figured that this was going to be a big deal. But hey, I'm 63 years old. I guess it's not a big deal to me, but to somebody who's a lot younger, it must be.
For how many years have you been watching the NFL? How long now?
50, 55.
There was one change like this in the past 50 years, and it was when they allowed the receivers to wear numbers in the teens back in 2003-ish. Yeah. And I didn't like that. At the time, I was like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? And it's funny because my reaction now is, what the hell, let's do it, because I think I've assumed at some level it's coming ever since Mike Ornstein tried aggressively to get the NFL to change the rule for Reggie Bush so he could wear 5 back in 2006. I just assumed at some point the NFL would do it. But I think the reaction is predictable and obvious because it changes the way that we see the games. And football is such a visual medium. We are going to revolutionize what it looks like at the NFL level. It's going to look like it does at the college level. You're going to have this swarm of numbers at positions we've never seen before. It is going to take some adjusting, and it does create this cottage industry of which player is going to try to get which number. And it really is amazing to me that Tom Brady, of all the hills he could choose to die on, and he never does. When has he ever complained about a rule, except, rule about how much air is allowed to be in the bladder of the football? Other than that, when's he ever complained about a rule? When's he ever? And of all the rules, and between the timing and the fact that he's coming off like old man, get off my lawn at the age of 43, once we scratch past that TB12 surface, maybe he is Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino. It's just odd to me that this is coming from him on this issue.
This is crazy, Mike. But I honestly, when I saw that tweet yesterday, I honestly thought of Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino. I'm serious. I can't believe you just said that. But the reason I thought of it is older guy, probably 20 years ago wouldn't have cared about this, but now he really does care because he's a little bit anal in his old age. And Tom Brady, I'm sure, is exactly the same way. He likes things the way they were. He doesn't see any big reason why they should change. And you know what? I'm sure in Brady's mind, if there have to be duplicate numbers on the practice squad,
why is that me? Why is that me?
Look at that.
Why is that me?
It's always you because you yell at clouds all the time. You yell at clouds all the time. Yeah, you do. But let me just make one other point. Brady probably thinks if he sat in a room with Brett Veach, he would say, okay, give 2 guys on the practice squad 30. Give an offensive and defensive lineman on the practice squad, give them both 63 or whatever. But don't cloud the game on Sunday. And I'm sure that's the way Brady thinks. And the way the Chiefs think is we want everybody to have an individual number.
And the other thing, too, if there really was some great strategic advantage to having this blur of dissimilar numbers for a defense, Nick Saban would have the Alabama defense in all sorts of funky numbers. He'd be using ampersands and exclamation points as numbers if there was some sort of advantage to this. So I don't. That's what makes it even weirder. Number one, Tom Brady shooting his shot on something like this, and number two, him missing the mark so badly. It just is weird. I'm not complaining about it. He's given us all the folderol we need to start the show on a Friday, and we've got 2 or 3 stories about it on PFT, and I'll probably write another 1 or 2 because people are interested. People like this because it is going to change the way we see the game.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.